Iran just told American soldiers hiding in Gulf hotels, "We know where you are." The bases are rubble. The troops moved to Four Seasons and Sheraton's. Iran says that doesn't matter. The moment a soldier checks in, the hotel becomes a target. Then Tehran told civilians in the area to leave. That was not a warning. That was a schedule. Iran has dramatically widened its list of potential targets in the Middle East war, warning that any hotel housing American soldiers is now fair game for military strikes. Iran's armed forces spokesman Abolfazl Shekarchi made the threat on March 26th, telling state television that the presence of US forces transforms civilian sites into military ones.
When all the Americans go into a hotel, then from our perspective, that hotel becomes American. Should we just stand by and let the Americans strike us? When we respond naturally, we have to strike wherever they are.
The warning follows reports that tens of thousands of American troops have been forced out of their regional bases after Iranian strikes rendered them unusable, relocating to hotels and office buildings across Bahrain, the UAE, and as far away as Europe. Iran's Fars news agency went further, naming specific locations it said were housing foreign forces, including the Four Seasons and Sheraton hotels in Damascus, and a newly activated US logistics base near Beirut's old airport. The IRGC then took the pressure a step further, putting out a call for civilians across the region to vacate any areas where US forces are known to be stationed, a move that signals Tehran may be preparing to act on its warnings rather than simply issue them. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi accused Washington of using Gulf nationals as cover.
From the outset of this war, US soldiers fled military bases in GCC to hide in hotels and offices. They use GCC citizens as human shields. Hotels in the US deny bookings to officers who may endanger customers. GCC hotels should do the same.
The threats land at a complicated moment. President Donald Trump extended his deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz until April 6th, saying talks were going very well, even as Washington weighed deploying an additional 10,000 troops to the region. The war, which began on February 28th after the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes killing Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has killed more than 1,900 people in Iran and over 1,100 in Lebanon. 18 Israelis and 13 American military personnel have also died. Senior US military officials have acknowledged that the dispersal of forces is making the conflict considerably harder to manage, with most troops now participating in operations remotely rather than from their original posts. Iran's sustained missile and drone campaign has left much of America's military infrastructure across the Middle East in ruins, forcing thousands of US troops out of their bases and into hotels, office buildings, and makeshift facilities scattered across the Gulf. The New York Times, citing American military personnel and officials, reported on March 25th that the land-based US military is now, in effect, fighting this war remotely, with only fighter pilots and their crews still operating from functional airfields.
Many of the 13 military bases in the region used by American troops are all but uninhabitable, with the ones in Kuwait, which is next door to Iran, suffering perhaps the most damage.
The report added that 6 American service members were killed at Port Shuaibah when Iranian fire destroyed an Army Tactical Operations Center. Ali al-Salem Air Base and Camp Waring were also struck, with damage to aircraft structures, fuel systems, and maintenance facilities. The damage extends well beyond Kuwait, though. In Qatar, a strike on Al Udeid Air Base, home to US Central Command's regional headquarters, knocked out an early warning radar system. In Bahrain, a drone hit communications equipment at the US Fifth Fleet headquarters. At Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, refueling tankers and communications infrastructure were both struck, and 2 former officials told The Times that command centers there lacked reinforced roofs. Nearly 40,000 US troops were stationed across the region when the conflict began on February 28th. Thousands have since been dispersed, some as far as Europe, while others remain in the Middle East, operating out of whatever space is available. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has been actively hunting them. Ebrahim Zolfagari, spokesperson for the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, addressed regional populations directly.
In
the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Considering that all American bases in the region have been eliminated, American commanders and soldiers have fled and taken refuge in hideouts outside the bases, and we are searching for them. We ask the people of the countries in the region to report their hiding places and, at the same time, demand the expulsion of Americans from the region for their own security. And all praise is due to God, the Almighty, the Wise.
Retired US Air Force Special Operations Specialist Wes J. Bryant told The Times the costs of this dispersal are real and unavoidable.
You can't just put all that equipment on the top of a hotel. Some of it is unwieldy. You're absolutely going to lose capability.
Washington insists operations are continuing. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said American forces have struck over 7,000 targets inside Iran. But even as the Pentagon reinforces the region with additional squadrons, air defense systems and paratroopers, the reality on the ground tells a different story, one that would go down as a legend in Iranian folklore. As the United States and Iran edge toward potential negotiations, a stark assessment from one of Britain's most experienced intelligence figures is reshaping the narrative of the war. In an interview with The Economist, former MI6 chief Alex Younger offered a blunt conclusion. Despite sustained US and Israeli pressure, Tehran may now hold the strategic advantage.
Iran has the upper hand. I regret reaching that conclusion. I spent most of my career dealing with the violence and brutality of the Revolutionary Guards. I did not shed a tear over the death of Ali Khamenei, but the reality is that the United States underestimated the task and, about 2 weeks ago, lost the initiative to Iran.
Younger has said Iran's battlefield resilience has surpassed expectations, citing early strategic decisions and adaptive military tactics that helped blunt the impact of sustained air campaigns. Younger argued that Tehran's approach to dispersing its military assets significantly enhanced its survivability.
The Iranian regime has shown greater resilience than anyone would have expected, in my view. They made some good decisions as early as last June regarding the dispersal of their military capabilities.
Younger added that Iran's use of what he described as horizontal escalation, launching rockets across a wide geographic range, initially appeared reckless but proved strategically effective.
At the time, I thought it was madness, but in fact, it is a very effective way of imposing a direct cost on the United States, and it has worked reasonably well.
A key turning point, according to Younger, has been Iran's ability to expand the conflict beyond traditional battlefields, particularly through energy leverage and regional escalation.
Iran understood the significance of energy warfare and threatened to close the strait. It turned the conflict into a global one. The Iranians have played their hand quite well, despite being dealt weak cards.
He also drew a sharp contrast between the strategic motivations of Washington and Tehran, warning that asymmetry in stakes is shaping endurance on the battlefield.
Trump made it clear that Iran is in an existential war and that he wants to see it with its back to the wall. The United States, by contrast, is in a war of choice. I think that has given the Iranians more staying power than the United States, and certainly more than its partners. I think that gives them the dominant position.
Younger's assessment challenges prevailing assumptions about Western military superiority, suggesting that resilience, escalation strategy, and control over energy choke points may be redefining the balance of power. As negotiations loom, the battlefield reality appears increasingly complex, where military might alone may not dictate outcomes, and where strategic endurance could ultimately decide the trajectory of the conflict. Iran has flatly denied any ongoing negotiations with the United States, dismissing claims of back-channel diplomacy as fake news, even as Washington signals a temporary pause in military escalation. According to statements on March 23rd, Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf rejected reports that talks were underway with the US, contradicting earlier assertions by US President Donald Trump.
Iranian people demand complete and remorseful punishment of the aggressors. All Iranian officials stand firmly behind their supreme leader and people until this goal is achieved. No negotiations have been held with the US, and fake news is used to manipulate the financial and oil markets and escape the quagmire in which the US and Israel are trapped.
His statement underscores Tehran's official denial of diplomacy and frames reports of talks as market manipulation amid ongoing conflict. The denial comes hours after President Trump claimed progress toward de-escalation, announcing a temporary halt to planned strikes.
I am pleased to report that the United States of America and the country of Iran have had, over the last 2 days, very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. Based on the tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations which will continue throughout the week, I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions.
This announcement signals a conditional pause in US strikes, tied directly to the outcome of what Washington describes as ongoing discussions. However, Iranian state-linked outlets have reinforced the denial. The IRGC-affiliated Fars news agency reported via telegram that no talks have taken place and hinted at imminent escalation, citing special events planned for Tel Aviv and regional US allied targets. Separately, Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghaei, quoted by IRNA, reiterated that Tehran's strategic position remains unchanged, particularly regarding the Strait of Hormuz. The conflicting narratives come at a critical juncture in the war, with the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of global oil flows, remaining a central pressure point. Markets briefly reacted to Trump's statement, with oil prices easing and equities rising, before Iran's denial injected fresh uncertainty. Since the conflict began on February 28th, casualties have mounted across the region. Iranian sources report over 1,500 killed in US-Israeli strikes, while Lebanon has seen more than 1,000 deaths and mass displacement amid Israeli operations against Hezbollah. Israel has reported 15 fatalities, while 13 US service members have been killed in the theater. With diplomacy publicly denied and threats of new attacks emerging, the trajectory of the conflict remains volatile, heading into the next 24 hours.